All right, fabulous micro students. Hopefully this is our last lecture of the quarter, and that you saw my announcement about no comprehensive final. Your exam 3 will be optional, meaning that if you take exam 3, it can replace a previous exam score, either exam 1 or exam 2. And you can take either part of exam 3. You can take just the short answer, you can take just the multiple choice, you can take both parts if you want. You can even, let's say, take the multiple choice portion of exam 3 and replace exam 1's multiple choice. And then if on the exam 3 short answer, you do better than the short answer on exam 2, I'm willing to mix and match. We're being more gracious than usual this quarter, understanding it has been a very unusual and challenging quarter, not just with your academics, but with everything else that's been going on in the world around us. So hopefully you read my announcement. If you have any questions about where you stand and whether you need to take exam 3, please reach out. We can have a conversation about that. I want everybody to be clear about where they stand and what they need to do to get the grade that they want out of this class and the grade that is possible out of this class. So let's have a conversation. I'm more than happy to chat with you. All right, that being said, what I'm going to do with this lecture is finish the Monopoly chapter. So we've come through Perfect Comp. There were quite a few lectures on Perfect Comp. Hopefully I can do everything with the Monopoly model in one lecture. It's based on the same foundations as Perfect Comp, with just a minor twist that the marginal revenue curve is no longer a horizontal line at the market price. All right, so let me go to my lecture notes. These lecture notes have been posted for a day or two already. I just haven't gotten to talking about them yet. And again, I apologize, my hair is pulled back. I did my exercising right before these lectures. I really should do these lectures first thing in the morning, but I always have those emails to get through in the morning. Anyways, bear with me while I open up. I'm going to share my screen here, open up my lecture notes, and we'll go through them together. All righty. And so here we go. And so talking about the monopoly market structure, going back to that handout, there's a whole handout. It's a matrix of the 4 market structures, okay? Going back to that handout, the characteristics of the monopoly market structure. My cat's over there. Sorry, I had to look away. Characteristics of monopoly are, we're talking now about mono, one firm, one dominant firm, and they're only producing one product, and they're the only producer of that product. You can think of a monopoly as being a local monopoly, or maybe even on a big scale as a global monopoly. In some cases, monopolies will have patents in the beginning. So think about a pharmaceutical company that creates a brand new breakthrough drug. They've patented that drug. They're the only ones allowed to produce that drug for a period of 14 years from when they initially apply for the patent. By the time that drug hits market, 7 of those years will already have expired. So they only really have 7 years of market time to recoup all of those 7 years upfront costs that they put into the development of the drug. But in any case, that's an example of why there might be a monopoly. Another monopoly that you might be familiar with is the Seattle Seahawks have a monopoly over professional football in the city of Seattle and the whole state of Washington, right? And so those are instances where there's a monopoly. Okay, one dominant firm in an area, let's say. Okay. There's significant barriers to entry. If you think about the NFL, right, there's huge. Nobody can just come in and say, I'm going to start an NFL team. Think about the chaos that would follow then. No, they've limited it to 32 teams, let's say. And if you want to come in and get a team, all the existing owners would have to vote and let you in. And it's a huge franchise fee, a huge startup fee that they would charge you, hundreds of millions of dollars to start an NFL team. Once you even get approval of the owners to get in. So huge barriers to entry. Other examples of barriers to entry, I've already mentioned one. I've mentioned the patent, as well as the league structure could be one. There could be legal reasons why there are barriers to entry. So we want our doctors to be licensed. We want our CPAs to be accredited. We want our lawyers to pass the bar, right? Our pharmacists have to be credentialed. Okay, so there's certain industries where there's these barriers. Not anybody can just become a pharmacist. Not anybody can just become a doctor or a dentist. You have to have a degree and pass a licensing board in your state. Licensing requirements are an example of a barrier to entry. The size of the existing firms themselves, or the existing firm in this case, is also a barrier. If they have name recognition, it's very, very hard to break in, especially if you think about a product perhaps where the name of the product is the company's trademarked name. For example, Kleenexes. Facial tissues, right, are dominated by Kleenex. Hey, pass me a Kleenex, right? It's hard for other facial tissue companies to break in because they have that name recognition. Cotton swabs, Q-tips, for a long time dominated that market. And so you call it a Q-tip instead of a, hey, pass me a Q-tip. I need to clean out my ears, instead of a cotton swab. Okay, and so in that case, it's not hard. I mean, it's not impossible to break into those markets. It's just more challenging because of the chokehold that those existing firms have on their market share already. All right, so those are barriers to entry. The last major characteristic of monopolies is that they are price searchers. They do not have to take the market price as given. They can search across the whole demand curve and find the best price to charge. They cannot charge anything they want. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. People always say, oh, monopolists, they can charge whatever. No, they can't. No one's going to pay $50 for a pack of Skittles. Duh, that's stupid, right? So don't say stupid stuff like that. Got it? All right. So, no, monopolists cannot. And in fact, they do not even charge the highest price that they can. They charge the best price, which is usually a little bit further down the demand curve. But they are bound by the demand curve. They cannot go above demand. So there's a constraint on monopolists, right? Even like NFL, if we all decided to stop going to the games, they would lower prices. Okay, so when people complain about the high prices of tickets to the Seahawks, I go, yeah, we'll tell everybody to stop going. We can do that. We can fix it. Okay. Anyways, so they're price searchers. So the demand curve is going to be vital, as is the marginal revenue curve, which no longer is a horizontal line, but the marginal revenue curve in a monopoly model is going to be a downward sloping curve that is steeper than the demand curve. If it's a linear demand curve, the marginal revenue curve will have a slope that is twice the slope of the demand curve. That's a constraint. It has to do with derivatives and calculus, but trust me on that. So if you have specified a market that has a linear demand curve, the marginal revenue curve will fall twice as quickly. It'll have a slope that's twice that. If you have a nonlinear demand curve, just know that the marginal revenue curve lies inside and is steeper than that demand curve. Okay, so here we go. So determining the output decision of a monopolist, they are price searchers. They're going to search across the demand curve, taking into account elasticities even, right? They're going to find the best price to charge. Okay. We're going to initially assume that there's no price discrimination. Later in your chapter, I'm going to leave that up to your chapter, they talk about price discrimination. And what that means is if the firm can distinguish between groups of consumers, they can discriminate. They can charge different groups different prices. And this sounds scary, it sounds evil or mean, but it's not. It's just like giving seniors a discount, giving students a discount, giving youth a discount, okay? Because we have ID cards and we can put you into certain categories. Giving a military discount. You have your military ID card, you get a cheaper price, right? That's price discrimination. It's not that big a deal. It is a big deal if they discriminate on the basis of a group such as race, gender, ethnicity, right? Religion or sexual orientation. If the discrimination, the price discrimination is done on those, then we have a little bit of an issue. Now, I know I said gender, which could get some bars into trouble because sometimes they'll have ladies' night or, you know, happy hour for women or something like that. That is really walking that line of discrimination, and they probably shouldn't do that. They shouldn't charge different rates based on gender, okay? What else was I going to say? So anyways, but initially for our purposes of these lecture notes, we're going to assume that the firm cannot distinguish between its consumers and it's going to charge everybody the same price. So it has to find the optimal price for the most consumers. Okay. So what they do is they look at a variety of total revenues, and they're going to want to choose the biggest one in some cases, taking into account the costs, total revenue, total costs. So what we really want to look at, again, getting down to it, is the decision making is very much like the perfect comp, except it is like the perfect comp that we're going to do marginal revenue equals marginal cost. The firm is going to produce all units that bring in more revenue than it costs to make those units. So we want to produce all the way up to where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. We would never produce a unit where marginal cost is greater than marginal revenue. That doesn't make sense. We wouldn't do that. Why would we make something that we know we're going to sell for less and take a loss on? No. All right. So the decision rule right here is find MRMC, determine Q, go back up to ATC. Sound familiar? It is. It's very familiar, just like the perfect comp. The only difference is now the shape of the MR. Okay. So then find the correct price and then determine profit or loss. All right, so here we go. To get around this idea, to prove to you that marginal revenue is in fact downward sloping, it's the green one over here in my fancy schmancy picture. My handwriting's really bad on my iPad. Sorry. Looks like a third grader did this. But hang in there. I'm an economist, not an artist, and not even an architect. Architects have amazing printing, right? That was going to be my backup career. If economists didn't work out, I was going to go to architecture school. I just think that is super cool. Designing buildings that are going to last for a long period of time, right? But anyways, what we've got here, look at these first two columns on the left, the P and the Q. That's a demand schedule. So this is a demand schedule for pizzas, okay? And I've got the prices going down from a high of 24. Nobody'd be willing to pay $24 for a large pizza. In $3 increments, 24, 21, 18, 15, and so on, all the way down to 0. If the firm was giving the pizzas away, they could give away 80 pizzas a night, okay? And so as we drop the price $3, our quantity demanded increases by 10. So 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, and so on. All right, so based on this demand, and I plotted it, look here, the blue line. The blue line is these first two columns plotted. 24 and 0, 0 and 80, connect the dots, straight line, and there I have my demand curve. All right, to find marginal revenue, I have the formula over here. Marginal revenue is the change in total revenue divided by the change in quantity. So I'm going to find my total revenues, that's the third column, and then I'm going to do change in total revenue divided by change in quantity. Noticing that my change in quantity is 10 units every time. 0 to 10, 10 to 20, and so on. So my denominator each time is going to be 10. So once I find the total revenue, the change in total revenue, change in total revenue, then I'm going to divide that change in total revenue by 10 to get my marginal revenue. All right, let's do this. So to find the total revenue is just P times Q. The price times how many units. So 24 times 0 obviously is 0. At a price of 21, I could sell 10 pizzas. 21 times 10, my total revenues is 210. At a price of 18, I could sell 20 pizzas. 18 times 20 is 360. 15, I can sell 30, and that would be 450, and so on. So we go all the way down. 0 times 80 again is 0. All right. So marginal revenue, change in total revenue divided by change in quantity, but my change in quantity is 10. So from 0 to 10, and you always go as your quantities go up. As your quantities increase, what happens to your margin as we go this way to the right on my horizontal axis? As my quantities go from 0 to 10, 10 to 20, and so on along the horizontal axis. So from 0 to 10, I went from total revenues of 0 to 210. That's a change of 210 divided by 10 is 21. Notice that for this first point here, the price and the marginal revenue are the same. That's why right here where I have the green dot on the blue line, they're the same, okay? After that, the marginal revenue falls faster. That's going to be really important in the next picture when I'm going to lift the demand and marginal revenue curves together from that point, that pivot point right there where they're both equal. That's why I have it in red. That pivot point, I'm going to lift it off of this graph and I'm going to slap it on a set of firms' cost curves. Okay, and that's how a monopolist is going to make their decision. So hang on. So that's really important. Well, let's go and look at from 10 to 20, what happens to my total revenues. My total revenues go from 210 to 360. That's an increase of 150. 360 minus 210, it went up 150. Divided by 10, that's where I got the 15. And let's do one more. From 20 to 30, my total revenues went from 360 to 450. That's an increase of 90 divided by 10, and that's going to give me my 9. And if you keep going, I have the rest of the numbers filled in here. Notice it does go negative, and notice my marginal revenue curve down here crosses the horizontal and goes negative, and that's okay. So now we have an important distinction that the demand curve and the marginal revenue curve for a monopolist are not the same curve. Remember, under perfect comp, they were the same curve. It was a horizontal line, and I wrote on the right side, D equals MR. It's the same thing. It's the D curve, it's the MR curve. In this case, they're separate because they're price searchers. All price searchers will have a demand and MR curve that looks like this, where the demand curve is on the outside, the marginal revenue curve is on the inside and falls faster. All right, so that's important to understand and where that comes from. Keep going. What we're going to do now is we're going to take that demand and MR and we're going to slap it on the firm's cost curves and figure out how much is the firm going to produce, how much are they going to charge, because they get to choose. Rather than perfect comp, where they have to take the market price as given, the monopolist, they're the only guy in charge, they get to choose the price. All right, so let's go. Here we go. The monopolist decision, and this is what it looks like for a monopolist that is earning profit. So originally over here on the market, on the left-hand side, otherwise, this looks very similar to the perfect comp setup. I've got the market model on the left, and I've got a set of cost curves over here on the right, okay? So the difference now is, here is my black intersection, P1 and Q1. That's what would happen if the market were competitive. But in this case, that's not what's going to happen, because notice this MR falls inside the D. Notice there's this pivot point up here where the D and the MR connect, right? I showed you where that came from in the last page, right? So we take this D and then it has this MR. I'm going to lift this and I'm going to place it over here. So just imagine I copied this and I pasted it over here. The same exact D and MR. I know it looks slightly different, but they're exactly the same, trust me, okay? So I lifted this D and MR and I just slapped it on to the firm's cost curves. The first thing the firm is gonna do, the monopolist firm, like all firms, regardless of market structure, you always choose MR equals MC, okay? MR equals MC. So I look for where does that red MR cross my gray MC, and look, it's right there, okay? So I come straight down, and that's my quantity monopolist. You can see this on the market model because the supply curve is the marginal cost curve. The supply curve is the marginal cost curve, okay? So MR, MC, they should cross right there, and notice they line up. I made them line up, okay? All right, that's my quantity. You come up, you come over this gray line, that is not the price. Why would you charge that price when you can charge a heck of a lot more? So what you want to do, although the firm could choose to charge down here, they'd be very, very nice and they'd be losing money, be a very bad decision. They're going to go up to the demand curve. The demand curve tells them the maximum they can charge for that quantity. So go up Q all the way to the demand and then come across. And then come across and you'll see the price is way higher than the MR-MC intersection, okay? So to find price, once you find, so here you go. Step 1, find MR-MC. Step 2, go down to Q, down to Q. Once you have Q, step 3, go up to demand, up to demand to get your price. Price is up here on the demand curve. Okay, now I've chosen my price, and look, it matches over here. Same thing, MRMC, choose Q, go up to demand to find price. Look here, the monopolist price is above the perfectly competitive price. It will always be that way. They don't have any competition to keep the prices lower. Okay? So now I found price. In order to calculate profit or loss, very much like the perfectly competitive market, what I have to do is go from Q up to ATC. So Q to ATC, I have the green dot and come across, and there's my green ATC. It's below my price. That gives me this rectangle that I have cross-hatched in yellow. That is my positive profit because price is greater than ATC. So I've got a profit margin going on there. It's positive, okay? So this is what it would look like for a monopolist earning profit in the short run. The good news is because of those barriers to entry, what happens in the short run is exactly the same for the long run. The long run and the short run are not different for the monopoly model because of the barriers to entry. There will be no entry or exit of other firms to adjust that to break even, like so in the perfectly competitive markets. All right, so let's scroll down and say, does this work the other way? Do monopolists earn losses? Oh yeah, they do. They're subject to demand. If their demand falls, they can't help it. They're going to be earning losses, okay? So even if they're the only golf course in town, by November, they're going to have to shut their doors, right? Kind of idea. Or by September, they're going to be making losses, okay? And so what does a loss look like? In this case, demand marginal revenue, again, lift that same demand in MR that's here in the market model, bring it over, slap it onto the cost curves, okay? First step, MRMC, straight, step 2, straight down to Q. There's my Q, see it in gray? Step 3, all the way up to the demand curve to find price, all the way up, follow that gray dashed line, oops, stop there. Demand curve, black, and there is a gray dot on that demand curve come across, and there's my PM. That's gonna be my price for the monopolist, okay? And then the next step, step 4, whatever, find ATC, from Q straight up to ATC. Notice in this case, the ATC is above the price. They're losing money per unit. They'll wait it out as long as they're above their average variable costs. They're going to wait it out, hoping that demand will increase in the future. Okay. If they're below the AVC, they're subject to shut down too. Like if they're the only golf course in town in December, they're shut down, right? So anyways, that AVC does become important for them as well. All right, so in this case, they're losing money, and it will stay that way, ceteris paribus, short run, long run, and they're just contingent upon demand, right, until demand changes for them. What does break even look like? So we've done the 2 scenarios. Let's say, what would happen, what would have to happen to make this firm just exactly break even, just to be exactly so the price meets their cost? Well, in this case, same thing. You've got your D and MR here in the market, lift it, put it over here, and you notice that once you found your MRMC, come down to Q, go up to D, right? That's going to give me my price. And then I go and do it again from Q up to ATC, and it's the same point. If the ATC curve crosses or bumps the demand curve at the same place where the price is going to equal ATC, this firm is going to break even. So it's very possible that a monopolist firm can earn either profits, losses, or break even, or even shut down. 4 possible scenarios in the short run, and those exact same 4 possible outcomes in the long run because of the presence of the barriers to entry. And that's what I have here. Long run is exactly the same as short run for the monopolist because of the barriers to entry. There's no long run adjustment process. Okay? All right, so give me a second here. Take a drink. All right. And so the next thing to think about is let's compare. Let's pause. We finished the monopoly model. It was so easy because we already had built the foundations of having the market model and the firm cost curve model on the right. That structure has already been built in Perfect Comp. We took like 3 or 4 lectures to do that. Paid off. We don't have to do as much now. Let's compare monopoly to perfect comp. And one of the ways we do that, I've said repeatedly, monopolists are not as efficient as perfect comp. We went through at the end of the perfect comp lecture and we said, okay, perfectly competitive markets are most efficient. What we mean by that is allocatively efficient and productively efficient. So let's use those 2 notions again. Let's revisit allocative and productive efficiency and apply them to the market model so that I can show you, prove to you that monopolies are not efficient. All right, revisiting. Allocative efficiency says that if I am charging the customer approximately what it costs me to make the product, okay? So the price that I'm charging is similar to the cost of production for the last unit made. Does price equal marginal cost? So let's go back and ask the question. Let's go and look at a profit. It doesn't matter, any of them. Let's look at the profit one, okay? And look at the price, PM, and look at the marginal cost. The marginal cost is way down here. It's this low price that I said, don't charge that price, right? Don't be silly and put your price down here when you could charge up here, right? This down here is MC. MC is way down here, and this is the price. So no, monopolies. Look here, price above marginal cost. Look here, price above marginal cost, okay? So in all 3 cases, monopolists will always charge a price that is above marginal cost. They can, they don't have competition. So they are not allocatively efficient. This is a source of inefficiency, right? Okay. The productive efficiency says that is the firm producing at the minimum ATC? Is that going to be the case? Well, let's go back and let's look. Scenario 1, it looks close, but it's actually on this upswing. Okay, so it's slightly higher. It's not too far from the minimum. Here, we're producing up here, and minimum is down here. Here, again, it's pretty close, but this is still falling until it hits the MC. So we can assume there's a slight, maybe pennies difference there. But there's no guarantee that the firm will get to minimum ATC. There's nothing that will force them to get to minimum ATC. If they do get there or get pretty darn close, like a couple of those showed, it's accidental, okay? So there's nothing that forces them to be. So we're gonna say that many times the monopolists are productively inefficient and will choose a level of output where their ATCs are above what they would otherwise have been in the long run perfect comp scenario, okay? All right, so let's show what does this look like if we were to, let me go back up here. Compare the monopoly with the perfect comp. And I'm actually going to pause this lecture for 1 second because I do want to go draw this picture. These are kind of convoluted and I don't want to mess them up. So I'm going to draw a new picture so we can talk about this comparison in just a little bit more detail. So you won't miss me because it's going to be instantaneous, but give me a second here to pause. All right, I'm back. Did you miss me? All right, so I'm going to share my screen again. Let me go back. I'm going to open up. I drew a simpler version. I just cleaned it up just a little bit. So let me go here, open up. This is in the lecture notes. Okay. And so hopefully you can see this. And what I've done, I've just used the market model. It's the simplest way of showing the difference, the major difference in the market outcome. How does the market differ between the monopoly market structure and the perfect comp the perfect comp market structure, right? So just looking at that, you can see using this market model, the downward sloping black line is demand 1, upward sloping S1, the supply curve. The intersection of the black lines represented by PPC and QPC. That's the traditional supply and demand intersection that we talk about with our most efficient, perfectly competitive markets. The price would prevail at PC and the quantity would be out here at quantity PC. When we think about the monopoly market structure, we need to take, oh, damn it. I've labeled this wrong. Give me 1 second. I'm going to fix it because it's really going to bother me. So hang on. I'm going to pause for a second. Okay, I'm back. I'm going to try this one more time. Screen share. Let's go back. Fixed my typo. I had originally written MC. What was I thinking? MC goes upward, not downward. This is MR. So now I've got the demand and the MR curve for the monopolist. So I always, for the monopolist, I find MR MC, knowing that supply is MC. The MR crosses the supply curve, come down. Notice my monopoly quantity is less than my perfect comp quantity. Notice this arrow, it's less than, right? On the other hand, when I go from my quantity up to the demand to find the maximum price, not this lower one, but in fact, this upper price, you're gonna go to the demand curve to find what you can charge. The maximum price this monopolist can charge is PM. Notice that the price that the monopolist is going to charge is always greater than the price that perfect comp can charge. So to recap, when comparing, right, when comparing, if I can type, monopoly versus perfect comp, right, you will see, right, a couple things. One is that the price of the monopolist is always going to be greater than the price for perfect comp. We notice that the quantity of the monopolist is going to be less than the quantity of perfect comp. And we're going to notice that monopolies have a dead weight loss. And we're going to call that or denote that DWL. So when you look up here, notice these are lost opportunities, trades that could have happened under perfect comp. This many people could have gotten the item and could have gained from it. But instead, because of the lower quantity, this is lost social gain. We call it a deadweight loss to society, lost opportunities, people who could have gotten that good. If this was a pharmaceutical drug, that's actual patients, right? So that can be significant. Recognize that that deadweight loss could be important, okay? So monopolies will always have this triangle. Make sure that you can recognize that. It's the triangle in between the monopoly quantity and the perfect comp quantity, and I've got it hashed in green here. So make sure that you can recognize that monopolies come with that deadweight loss, and that's the source of inefficiency in addition to the allocative and the productive efficiency. Monopolies are inefficient because they have a deadweight loss. All right, so I think that wraps it up. We've compared our two. The real, the takeaway I think should be that most of our firms do in fact operate in the middle, in the monopolistic comp and the oligopoly, knowing that perfectly competitive markets are our most desirable and our most efficient. The goal for an economy would be to get more firms into the left, into the monop comp and even perfect comp range, right? And things like that. So something to think about when you're thinking about the competitive environment within which the firms operate. All right, I think you've got enough that you can go and do the homework now. If you have any questions, please reach out. And as always, if you need an extension, simply email me before the due date. I'm very accommodating in those regards and entering extensions for individuals. Some of you have been very good about doing that and asking for requests. Just make sure you get those in before the due date, and I'd be happy to consider, and in most cases, give you an extension if you need an extra day or two, okay? All right, get to work. I'm proud of you guys. We're gonna make it. We're almost there. Finish strong. All right, I'm gonna end there.